Welcome to On Thursdays We Thrive podcast. We are licensed therapists here on Long Island, New York.
Our goal is to provide tools and resources to anyone considering starting therapy and to fight the stigma of mental health through a millennial lens.
Even though we are licensed therapists, our podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and is not a replacement for individual psychotherapy.
To book a session with us, head on down to longislandteletherapy.com. So have a seat and get ready to thrive, learn, explore, and grow with us.
Welcome back to another episode of On Thursdays We Thrive. I'm Liana.
I'm Sam.
And today we're going to introduce the topic of infidelity in relationships, why it's not black and white, and we are going to answer questions like, can a couple survive after a partner cheats? Is once a cheater always a cheater? Can trust be rebuilt? Or does infidelity mean that it's over for good? And to discuss all of this, we're going to be welcoming Lisa Current, LMFT. Lisa is a licensed relationship and family therapist and clinical director at Gooding Wellness. She has over 13 years of experience and specializes in work with couples and families. She utilizes a research-based approach to guide the work, including mindfulness-based, solution-focused, system theory, and Gottman method couples therapies. She has also taught master's level classes and delivered presentations on couples and family counseling. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We're so happy to have you.
Yes, we're so excited. We're excited to talk about this topic and welcome you on the pod. So first, we're going to go through our glows and grows. So again, our glows are something that has gone well for us recently or something observed well, and grow is something that we're currently working on. So Liana, you want to start us off?
Sure. So my glow is that last weekend we saw some family in Florida, which was really nice. And even though it was a little overcast, it was just nice to be out of this type of setting and really cold. So it was nice to just get a break. And then my grow is being better at changing routine. And it's interesting because even though I like change, like it's weird. I like the change in jobs. I like big change, but like the consistent day-to-day change in routine messes with my head. Like,
oh yeah.
And I thought of this as I was reflecting on last weekend because it was a Friday to Sunday quick trip. And it did shake me up a little bit in regards to my routine. So I'm definitely working on trying to be more flexible from the day to day.
Yeah, that's so hard. And even just like different hours, if I go in, I start earlier one day and it's like everything's all jagged because it's hard for us to not be on a routine. So yeah, I totally get that.
Yeah. Yes. So that is mine. Lisa, what's your glow and grow?
Well, see, my glow is sort of some pride in my family. So we rescued a cat that had been kind of abandoned or dumped. I help out with a feral colony near my home, and
this
cat showed up. Yeah, and it was very friendly. So I managed to get it in a kennel and brought it to my house, and it had to stay in the garage because we didn't know if it was sick or not. But, my family was so sweet. They took turns going out and just sitting with it because I wanted to have people around and petted it and fed it. And then we ended up getting it to an adopter who, took it to the vet and got it checked out and is now finding it a forever home. So I was so proud.
Good.
So you're not keeping it?
We're not keeping that one. We already have two. And and one's a kitten. So yeah.
Yeah, you have your hands full.
Yeah. I gotta have my limits. Yes.
No, if I could rescue all the cats in the world, I would. But I can't.
My daughter's the same way.
I was just having a conversation with someone that I can't even watch the videos of kittens being rescued because it's too hard. Even though I know they're going to be good.
Yeah, me too.
I'm like, no, they don't know that they're going to be good.
Yes, they're so innocent.
No.
I know,
yeah. But that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. Wow,
it is.
Thank you. Yeah. So in my grow, let's see. I have been struggling with that. I want to multitask, and kind of similar to what you were talking about, Liana, with the routine. Like, I work certain days, I don't work certain days, and then I'm trying to constantly do work stuff, do home stuff, do all these things. Often at the same time, and it just doesn't work, and I know there's lots of research now about multitasking doesn't work. We're not good at it, even though we think we are. And so I've been really trying to instead like single task, just make lists and tackle one and then tackle the next and then tackle the next, but focusing on one at a time.
That's interesting. I didn't know that there was research on that. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I've seen that research.
Sometimes we're like, well, I'm a good multitasker, but are we really? So I like that. And definitely could all grow with that.
For sure.
So my glow is actually that I've been consistent with journaling.
Oh, yeah. Yay. I heard you got the Jot journal. Not I heard, you told me you got the
Quick
Jot
plug. And you recommended it to me. And honestly, I'm kind of shocked at myself for like staying so consistent with it. Like I look at it as like the first page of being something that I could do before I start my day, and one kind of at the end to reflect. And I like it that it's kind of based on more positivity and allowing me to feel free to write wherever. But I've been consistent with it. And actually at first it felt a little bit worse for me, which was interesting because I was bringing things to the surface, of course, that I'm usually maybe not. But as days went on, it felt more beneficial to like release that. So that's definitely a glow for me.
And that's normal.
Awesome, Samantha. Yeah. And that's something I'm talking about with clients all the time. Like, it may get worse before it gets better because we're bringing stuff up.
It's like, we say it to them all the time, our clients all the time, but when it hits for us, we're like, oh wait,
why did this happen? Right. I don't get it.
I could take my own advice. Oh, okay. Right.
I guess it works for us too.
Yeah. Yep. Interesting. And my grow is that I'm working on setting boundaries within myself. So kind of being strict with myself of like avoiding distractions before bed. So I've been trying to do, like I said, the journaling before bed and telling others around me or whatever it may be to I'm going to wind down and not just look at my phone 30 seconds before I fall asleep. And it's hard for me because I have severe FOMO, no matter what that looks like, of like, I want to hear about people's day or I want to, be on social media and whatever. So that's a grow for me. It's been slightly successful, but a work in progress.
And that's what these grows are. I get that though, where I'm just like, I don't want to stop right now. I want to listen to this podcast. I want to go on TikTok. So I totally get that.
Yeah. Yep. So.
All righty. Well, we're going to get into it when we come back into different types of cheating and how often it occurs. Can trust be rebuilt? So stay tuned.
Just tell us that, there have been all different types of cheating that we're, exposed to. Maybe online, emotional. What are the different types of cheating nowadays?
Okay. So there's actually been some good sort of meta studies looking at the different types of cheating. So they have found 11 different types, and these can overlap. So it's not just necessarily one or the other, but there are those who are avoiding conflict about or intimacy involved in discussing what they want sexually. So it's easier just to go to somebody else. Those who maybe had a one-time affair, right, where it's based on maybe they were out at a conference or something, there was alcohol, drugs, or some other circumstances involved, and it's really just a one-time brief thing. There are some things that are more individual based, like somebody who might have a personality disorder, like narcissism or something, and they're really not thinking about how the other person might feel. There are what are called philanderers, which are people who feel entitled to be able to sleep with who they want, or that they're looking to score, and there are people who are actually dealing with sexual addiction. So there are those who want to sort of pay back their partner for something they perceive they've done to them. And the affair is the way to do that. There are other couples who sort of lead parallel lives, right, where one or the other is involved with someone else. So I think a famous example of this is Prince Charles and Camilla, right? So he was having a whole separate thing with her throughout his marriage to Diana, right? Some people really just have a bad relationship. Some of those people are actually looking for an escape. And the affair is maybe the way to sort of push things to the forefront and end things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some of those people are actually even looking for a bridge, right? They want someone who's going to be there when they're not with the other person.
Yes.
And then there are, what we see a lot right now, and this is increasing, and people are really worried about this, is the online affairs, right? So this is where you meet someone online. It is very easy because you don't even have to like get dressed and leave your house, right? So you could be on a board with someone chatting, you could text, do phone calls, some even through games, like a lot of these games where people are playing together, this is happening, people are hooking up. So it's very convenient and harder to track. You don't even have to like find an excuse to leave the house, right? You can do it when your partner is asleep or something. Emotional affairs. So this is, often involved in a sexual affair, but it can also be completely separate. And this is when you have really come to be very connected emotionally with another person. And what I often hear when I'm working with a couple is this is the hardest thing to get past. It's, they can in some ways move past the sexual, but that you were emotionally connected to somebody else is hard to swallow, and that requires a lot more work.
It has been brought to my attention that emotional cheating also is, for an example, of someone fascinating over another person. Maybe if they're, I don't know, it could be someone on Instagram or someone they used to hook up with or whatever that is, and they're discussing it with their friends. Oh, I wish I could get with her. And, things like that, kind of talking about other people, or even, fantasizing about those people, that it could be an attainable thing or even not. Is that considered emotional cheating as well, would you say?
Yeah, I think if it gets to a point where you are focused on another person rather than your partner, right? And that's the whole thing. Like, part of what we know about what makes a successful relationship is that you are consistently turning towards your partner. And if you are turning to someone else, that starts to become a problem. Yeah.
That's a good point. And I going to what you were saying with the convenience and how, like, with the online dating or just like all these different outlets that we can connect to other people, and how important it is that we have a strong foundation within our relationship. And like you were saying with the communication, how important that is, like being able to express our needs to our partners.
Right. And of course, we know that there's a difference between like being attracted to someone else, like, oh, that person's really attractive.
Yes.
And actually like continually fantasizing about them, discussing them with friends, or then the person themselves, whatever that is. So just want to differentiate.
Yes,
definitely.
And not because you think Zac Efron's attractive that you're cheating or something, but
yes. If you start following Zac Efron around, then you might have a problem.
Right.
Attractive. Yeah.
So, not to scare people, but in your experience or just from your research, how often does cheating occur?
So estimates are that affairs happen in a quarter to a third of committed relationships. Now, again, that could be anything from the one night, stand to an ongoing affair.
Wow, that's a lot.
That is a lot. Yeah.
Wow. And have you seen a difference between, or the different types of cheating of men versus women in cheating?
Well, what we do know is that the gender difference in infidelity was largely driven by sort of opportunity, right? And as women have come more into the workforce, as they're out of the house more, they have more opportunity as well. And so women are actually on track to be at the same level in initiating affairs as men. Now, what is difficult for women is that there's more risk involved in them having an affair, right? So especially in certain cultural groups, there's an increased risk of interpersonal violence, right? Or even death. In any relationship where there might already be domestic violence, that's something that can also be, risk factor. And they're also more at risk for legal effects. Just because, if in our society, men still tend to make more money, right? And if they find out that the woman's having an affair and then they file for divorce and use that, there's much more risk to her. So it's still riskier for women, but they're on par to become.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, whether someone's doing it secretly or they feel like it's not going to affect the other partner, or it's, innocent, some may say, why does this overall just hurt so badly?
Well, I mean, I think we can all empathize with the idea that the person who you love the most, that you trust the most, who you opened yourself up to and have been vulnerable with, has betrayed you, right? And there's a whole range of feelings that come with that. So, honestly, we think of betrayal, but there's rage, there's grief over what you thought your relationship was. There's sometimes feelings of inadequacy. There's just all sorts of things that kind of go through. And, just like we know with the sort of grief process, there's a whole range of things that kind of come and go and, get sticky. Yeah.
And in that, and just seeing and hearing you say that it's such a wide spectrum of emotions, that's why it's so common for partners who are trying to come back from infidelity within their relationship to like one day be very angry, one day be very happy, one day to be very upset and not want anything to do with their partner, and just normalizing that it's not a straight linear process.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's very important for people, because you're right. One day you may seek them out wanting sort of some assurance, and the other day you might be, don't touch me, so
right.
Yeah.
Right. It's like going through that roller coaster, and there's a gajillion reasons why people stay in like you said, some domestic violent relationships or infidelity and things like that. So can relationships come back though after this? Like once a cheater, always a cheater, or no?
It depends, right? So I would say absolutely relationships can come back if both people are committed to honesty and rebuilding the relationship and the work that's going to take, right? And ending that other relationship. So that cannot continue, right?
Right.
If you have a situation where, you have somebody who is, has a personality disorder, or, one of these things that's purely based on their need to hook up with other people, that's going to be harder. Right. So it depends on the type of cheating. Yeah.
That
Can
makes
we trust again from this though?
Yes. Yeah. And I think, the thing is that it takes work, but relationships can not only regain trust, but I think relationships can be stronger as a result of it, because now like, here are the weaknesses and we need to work through this, right?
That's interesting. From we were kind of saying it before, like a mindset that, I mean, I still somewhat have, I guess, just from knowing this for so long. You're like, oh, well, trust is gone, there's nothing. But, like you're saying, if we're both putting in the work, the partner and yourself are putting in the work, and you're able to identify that it's over and done with, and we can identify what had brought it to that point.
Yeah.
So now that we know that there is a way to, there is a possibility to trust again and for the relationship to be rebuilt, how do you rebuild trust? Because that can seem really daunting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I always am very clear with people, this is not going to be a short thing. And this is going to take work, and it's going to be uncomfortable. So the basic blocks are that the unfaithful partner really needs to be very patient, needs to offer a very sincere apology, and probably many, many times, right? And they need to take full responsibility for their choice. Whatever was going on in the relationship, they made a choice. They really need to sort of close the door on the other relationship, and really open the window with their partner. So, you need to disclose what happened. And of course, you want ideally a therapist guiding that to ensure that people aren't getting more information than they can really handle. But you also need to open up those calendars and show them texts and phone logs and all of that. It is on you to prove that you are now changing and being different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the betrayed part. Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that the important part of like being okay with the questions from our partner, that like there are going to be questions and it's our job to answer them, but it's also the other partner's job to accept the answer, right? And like you're asking the questions, so these are the answers. And
yeah.
And that's a good way to understand, you know, if we're able to accept that. And it's harder for the person who had cheated and whatever they had done. This is the commitment to be honest, and we have to face that shame and guilt, and we have to identify if we're going to be able to come out with it instead of hide and suppress it and just say, all right, screw it, move on, and it is what it is, and I'm okay for doing this, and it's not a big deal. So validating that partner, and then the other person being able to accept it or work on accepting it, because it's not going to be an easy thing. But what are some like red flags, would you say, as we're talking about, you know, taking someone back or, you know, just working on it in general? What are some red flags to watch out for that might help someone's decision of whether or not to try to come back from their partner cheating?
Okay. Well, I think number one, if your partner refuses to give up or limit their contact with the other person, right? So sometimes you're in a situation where maybe you work with them, you can't cut them out of your life, but you can limit it. And again, showing that you are, you know, we just called for a business thing. You know, if you need to sit here in this room and listen to this to feel comfortable, that's okay, you know.
Right.
If it seems to be more of a fundamental thing to who your partner is, like they need to feel like I can score. If this is not the first time this has happened, if they're not very apologetic or they minimize it.
Yes, they're not validating your feelings.
Huge.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think these are things that you really need to think about. And generally, you know, when I'm working with someone, if they're really trying to decide, then I would refer them to individual therapy to really work through what they want.
Yes.
And that's a cool thing that we do here at Gooding Wellness, is that like, if let's say you're working with a couple, I've worked with individuals and vice versa, right? Because like we all work together as a team, and most, actually 9 times out of 10, at least that I know, a lot of times when there's couples in counseling, each individual partner does go to their own therapy. It's so important because there's 100%. So much individual issues going on.
Yeah.
And because I think in couples counseling, you're not going to be able to always attend to those individual needs, or we're just going for my partner and I want him or her to be able to talk about their past trauma and stuff, and I'm just going to sit here and, you know, so that's not what that would do. So like you're saying, if Liana does individual and Lisa, you do couples, this would be a good reference.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, you know, especially the trade partner needs to have a space where they can just be really upset, you know, and there's a certain place for that, of course, in the couples. They need to see how much they've hurt you. But if you just need to rage and vent, you know, that's probably not the spot. Like you need to have other places to also do that.
Yes. And since we're talking about what it can look like in the couple session, you know, we were talking about this prior to recording. This does happen. How do you work with couples who are trying to come back from infidelity? And do you ever think that a couple should call it quits? So like, how do you basically work with couples in that process to navigate that?
Yeah. So the first thing I do when I'm going to start meeting with a couple is, you know, I generally have one session with them where I'm kind of getting some background and doing some basic stuff. And then I have 2 separate individual sessions with them. And in that, I am screening for affairs and I'm screening for violence, because people are, you know, need to be in a safe place away from their partner to share about that stuff. So, and if somebody, you know, tells me that they're having an affair in that, then we have to have sort of a bigger discussion, because you cannot have one foot in the door and one foot out. Right. So, you know, I will be very clear with them. I can't do couples work if you're still seeing another person. And, you know, if you want to continue that, that's on you. That is your choice. But what we're going to need to do is go back and say, this isn't going to work. I think you guys need to continue with individuals. So from the get-go, I'm trying to nip that. And then from that point on, I usually see them together. So if they're going to bring up an affair, it's in the room together. Or if I'm suspecting something, I might break them up and do some individual and check in and see.
Yes.
But it's again going to be the same conversation. Like, we can't do couples if you're having an affair.
And you might not directly say that of, your partner's having an affair, so we can't continue services. But, it's just identifying that, it's kind of beyond what's going on. I think it'd be better if you guys sought individual for this time.
Yeah. I mean, usually we'll just say something like, I think this isn't working out. And the one who is betraying is more than happy to usually just be like, oh, I don't like her or whatever, yeah, I mean, whatever, that's fine with me. But
so kind of what you're saying of it just made me think of like that stigma of, oh, I'm not going to therapy because the therapist is going to obviously side with you, and she's going to yell at me the whole time, or she's going to hate me the whole time, and she's just going to keep making you look better, and I already know I screwed up, so we're not going. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So when I see a couple, the relationship is really my client. It's not either person. And I work very hard to have that balance, which is why I don't do a lot of meeting with them separately. It's all about the couple. And I have actually a no secrecy policy. That is not my job, and that will really interfere with my ability to work with you guys. Both of you have to trust me. So I won't do that. Yeah.
And like, if they call you on the phone or something and guess what, blah, blah, blah did, and you're like, let's like just bring that into session.
Yeah. So actually I have them sign a form before they even start, outlining all that. Don't call me, don't text me, don't email me, anything that you don't want brought up, because I will say, so she emailed me and let's talk about that.
Great.
So important.
I like that contract.
Me too. It's so easy, I think, like, because now, like, being that partner in the relationship, we finally feel like we have a third party and who can kind of like call it how it is, and they want to align with you. But like I love that you said the relationship is your client, not like the individual person. And so we're trying to work on the relationship and not quote unquote side with one partner or the other. But I really like that tool.
Yeah.
That is great. So, we
now,
just covered. Go ahead.
Oh, so I was just going to say, like, in terms of actually treating the infidelity, I think there are sort of three phases to that. So it's atone, attune, and attach, right? So first, that cheating partner has to tell them if they haven't already. And to be honest, most of the couples I see, they already know. They're coming in to deal with that. They need to take full responsibility for their behavior. And like we talked about, they need to sort of open the window on their personal life, right? And that often involves discussions in session about what happened. How much did it happen? Were you in love with this person? They really need to kind of open up. I do try to limit how much they get into the nitty gritty of what happened sexually, because again, that is an image you cannot erase, and really think about, what I usually say is only ask questions you really want the answer to.
Yes.
So really think about, do I want to know this before you ask it?
And it's hard for people, I think, in that moment to think like, no, my future self is going to like not be able to erase that image, because you're so enraged and angry possibly that you're like, I want to know where, how long, like, was it good, bad, whatever it is. And then you're like, oh crap.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a good thing that you're bringing up of like, really think about what you're going to be able to accept and be honest with yourself, not your angry self, but your calm self, your average self,
Yes, definitely. And then that second part, that attune, is that they really need to focus on rebuilding that emotional connection, which was severed, right? When you betrayed me, and I lost trust, and I felt like commitment wasn't there. And those are two pillars for any really successful relationship, right? So you got to rebuild that. And that probably depends on what kind of affair it was, right? So a one night thing is very different than an ongoing emotional and sexual affair. And the keys are really, you got to rebuild trust and commitment. You've got to be open to being very emotionally vulnerable. So this is the time where really that relationship has the ability to get much deeper than perhaps it was before the affair, because now you're really going to have to start sharing your most intimate and personal thoughts with the other person.
That's such a great point that you just brought up, because it's might be insinuating that prior, a lot of things were kept, or suppressed and kind of kept to ourselves. So that's kind of like what you were mentioning before of how it can be maybe even stronger after, because we're bringing things to the surface, or, saying this, whenever you used to do this, or I felt like you weren't emotionally there for me, so I sought elsewhere, whatever that is. And they're like, I had no idea. So, that's really interesting.
Yeah, it makes sense of how it sounds like even if this has been a really hard process, we're probably working on things that we haven't worked on in the past, right? Within our relationships, or even noticed that was like a real issue, right? So I don't want to see it from like a positive lens, but like with this really difficult situation, we're able to probably learn even more and take even more from this experience.
Yes, I think that's so key. Like what I often say in any relationship that I'm working on in therapy, is that conflict is not the enemy. Conflict is a chance to get closer, right? Crisis is a chance to get closer if you take that opportunity, right? So if you don't let it divide you and you choose to instead turn back towards your relationship and focus, it can be a great opportunity.
Of course.
Yeah.
Right. It's us against the conflict, not us against ourselves, each other.
Yeah.
Yes. And so the final step is rebuilding the sexual intimacy. So you got to work through the other stuff. You got to be feeling comfortable again before you can start doing that. But then having regular and sort of progressively more intimate discussions about sex, right? And this might include things like, what areas do you like to be kissed? Or, what makes sex more romantic for you? What part of my body is your favorite? Just like little things that you start discussing, and sort of increasing that part of their intimacy as well.
And I've seen that a lot of times it is difficult, and it makes sense why the sexual relationship is probably at the later stages, because a lot of times it is difficult to kind of get back so quickly. If that emotional connection is not rebuilt, that trust is not rebuilt, I've seen a lot of times it's where when we're trying to engage sexually, it's like all we can think about is our partner with that person. Right. So like, let's really focus on the trust and the emotional vulnerability first, because it will make the sexual vulnerability easier.
Yes.
And that also like kind of goes back to knowing like nitty gritty details, because I've had people say that they've had images just in their head constantly while trying to be intimate in that way. And they never want to be touched again, because they're like, it's competitive, or was I just as good? Like there's all those things involved in that.
Yeah. Oh, and you talked about, whether or not I think a couple should call it quits, right? Ultimately, that is not my decision. I will talk with them about this is going to take work. I will talk with them about what it's going to take, how open they're going to have to be, and all of that. And then it's up to them, and they may decide at the get-go, like it's worth it or not. They may, a few months into it, say, I can't do this anymore, or, but ultimately it is their choice.
Right. And that's like us being like non-biased people in our line of work, and that you're going to provide the tools and resources and help them communicate effectively, but ultimately they have to, because you can't feel what they're feeling. So they're going to have to decide that for themselves.
Yes, absolutely. It's their life, their relationship.
So after this, all this great knowledge and information, I think it'll help a lot of people. Is there anything else before we talk about your services and what you offer? Is there anything else that you would like to share with our listeners around this topic?
I think one thing that I think is important to recognize too is part of the reason I have the no secrets thing, part of the reason the affair cannot continue, is also that often the partner suspects something, right? They might not have put their finger on it, but something's off, which is why they're coming in, right? And if I agreed to keep that secret and sort of collude with the partner who's having the affair, that would sort of reinforce this idea that the other person feels sort of crazy, like something's off and you're telling me everything's fine, right?
Yeah.
And that would be destructive,
Yes.
in addition to being ineffective. So I think that's something important to keep in mind.
And it impacts the person's ability to trust again, right? If they
Yes.
feel like they can't trust their
Yes.
partner and now the therapist,
right? Even even the therapist is taking sides with him. So really, something's wrong with me and everyone hates me. It's like confirming that core belief of themselves, and just piggybacking off of them feeling crazy that's worked on with effective communication in the relationship. And if we're deciding that you have to sit in on certain meetings or something like that, that we have to kind of take that idea of, well, I seem crazy if I'm sitting on the meeting, but if this is what's needed to rebuild that trust, we have to go with that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Preach. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for everything. When we come back, we're going to talk more about your services, what you offer, and our rapid fire questions.
So tell our listeners more about your services and what you offer, where we can find you.
All right. Well, I work at Getting Wellness, as you know.
And, no way. Do you?
Yeah, what? I know. It's a great group. I specialize in helping families and couples improve their relationships. I work with parents who are adapting to kind of their children's tween through adult years, or wanting to sort of build their parenting toolbox. I also work with single adults who are wanting to better their relationships with parents and others. Much of my work is actually with couples, though, which is, my passion. So wanting to improve their relationship, whether that's dealing with an affair, rebuilding after years of focusing on children or work, or COVID, which has been another thing, or just strengthening their relationship.
Yeah.
Right? And then I work with parents who are also currently separating or already have, and they want to co-parent successfully.
That's great.
A wide variety. I like them. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
People can really go to you for everything.
Yeah.
One-stop relationship shop.
Yeah. For all your relationship needs. All right. So let's move into our rapid fire, which since this is, therapy through a millennial lens, we're making questions now more millennial focused. So Lisa, who was your favorite artist in the 90s?
I had to think about this. I loved Extreme. I don't know if you guys know who that is, but there was their guitarist, Nunu Betancourt, played Flight of the Wounded Bumblebee, which Jimi Hendrix also played. It's amazing. But I also loved Boyz II Men, Pearl Jam, Jewel. Like, it just really depended on my mood. So
I like that.
Yeah,
no, it's interesting. I don't know all of them, but I'm sure my parents would too, and my brothers even, maybe. I don't know.
The millennial period is a long period.
It's long.
It is a long period.
I actually saw something that said, like, on the radio, it still says, like, the best of the 80s, 90s, and today. And it's like, how long is today going to be for?
What? Yeah. That's a huge range. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And Pearl Jam, actually, when I worked in Seattle with homeless youth, they did a concert, which you can get the album to, which totally was to benefit our agency, which was amazing.
Oh my God. Wow. That's sick.
Yeah.
That's great.
And who was your hero? Who did you think was your hero or someone you idealized in the 90s?
That was the years where I was going through college. So I was very lucky to have a lot of strong, smart, successful women who, were all playing different roles in my life, but were such a huge influence for me. And I think continued to be an example of kind of what I want to be as a professional and mom and
I love that.
Worker. Yeah.
That's so sweet.
I love that. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for all of this. I mean, I think our listeners will really, really love this. And if you want to learn more or want to work with Lisa, head to goodingwellness.com and you can check her out there. And till then, keep thriving.
Thank you guys for listening to another episode of On Thursdays We Thrive. We love learning and growing with you each Thursday.
If you enjoy listening to us, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. To connect with us on Instagram, you can follow @On Thursdays We Thrive.
On Thursdays We Thrive is a partnership between Liana Ross, Sam Triani, and Gooding Wellness, LCSW PC. If you are in New York and would like to speak with a therapist directly or to one of us,
head on down to LongIslandTeletherapy.com or GoodingWellness.com. Keep thriving.